This is the second episode in a two-part series, and part 4 of our season covering Unsolved Homicides. This series includes discussion of violence and graphic description of murder and of crime scenes. Listener discretion is strongly advised. This is The Fall Line. Last episode, we began telling you the story of Angela and her investigation into the 1999 murder of her cousin Velecia, Lisa Lewis. The two had spent their childhood together in Memphis. Their mothers, who were sisters, brought up their own children more like siblings too. Angela and her brother, Lisa, and Lisa's sister Nisi, they spent their afternoons and weekends at Angela's house. As an adult, Angela feels like her home was a place where her Aunt Bee sought refuge for herself and for her daughters. Eventually, Angela, her mother, and her siblings moved to Seattle, and Aunt Bee and her children remained in Memphis. The move was life-changing for Angela's family. She says that they got opportunities that they never would have if they'd stayed in Tennessee. But her mother was worried about Bee and the girls. Though they talked often, visits weren't really possible due to distance, and it was 13 years before Angela could return to Tennessee. By then, Angela was 27. Her mother had passed away, and she was hoping to reconnect with family. She wanted her own young children to meet her aunts and uncles and cousins, and she was pleased to see everyone was doing well for themselves. Everyone, that is, except for Lisa and Bee. They were struggling and living in an apartment that Angela felt was dangerous. Later, she'd find out that Lisa had some conflicts with the neighbors. Though she didn't know it then, Angela was later told that the two had to live there because of issues with Lisa's credit. She'd allegedly had her identity stolen and had trouble renting anywhere else. Lisa and Bee were both working, and Lisa was going to school. In 1999, she was a senior at the University of Memphis. She'd always wanted to be a veterinarian, and she was pursuing that dream. That January, she was 27, and she was set to graduate in just a few months. She was also a little more than 8 months pregnant with a baby girl that she planned to name Velvet. Angela didn't know that her cousin was pregnant. She thinks it might not have been discussed among the extended family. She wasn't told until she got a call from another aunt, telling her that the unimaginable had happened. Lisa had been attacked and killed in the apartment, and Memphis police were investigating. Her baby had not survived either. As we told you last episode, Angela learned very little about Lisa's murder back in 1999. But as the years passed, she tried to gather what information she could from her relatives. It always bothered her how quickly Lisa's case had seemed to go cold. She knew that Memphis saw a lot of crime, but she remembered that other cases from the same area, they'd been solved. She kept hoping that she'd get another call, this time with the news that Lisa's killer had been found. But that never came. As the years passed, she lost touch with many relatives in Tennessee. Lisa's death had done that, had splintered them. But she did keep up with her Aunt Bee for a long time. They talked about what happened sometimes, but mostly, Angela worried about her Aunt Bee's health. They'd sometimes go a few months without talking, and one day, when she called and found that number disconnected, she was worried. It took her tracking down relatives on social media to find out that her Aunt Bee had died. For Angela, that was the start. She couldn't stop thinking about it, that her aunt had passed away without ever getting answers. She made the decision that she was going to advocate for Lisa herself. And because she had a background working in administrative roles in law enforcement, she knew a lot more than the average person. Last episode, we told you that Angela's investigation had stretched over quite a few years. First, she started speaking to her family, trying to get any information she could. She also reviewed anything that her aunt told her. She dug up every newspaper article and tracked people down. But most importantly, she gained access to Lisa's police file. Angela's been told that she's in possession of the entire thing, 22 pages in total. Those are the tools she has to do what she can to try and help Lisa. For a long time, she had no relationship with Memphis PD. Recently, though, she says, she's had much better lines of communication. Though we reached out repeatedly for comments or a statement, we did not hear back from Memphis PD. So keep in mind, everything from this point on is either from Angela's point of view or directly from the police file. Police files, they are always written very matter-of-factly. It's something that's disconcerting to read when you know what the scene must have been like for everyone that was there, and need to get down the facts, short statements. The creation of a record, it often feels cold. But that's where Angela has spent her time, picking through every single word, trying to understand precisely what happened. She's compared what's there to what B told her. She's also trying to identify any scrap of evidence that could be used now to solve Lisa's murder, and to identify who ended Velvet's life before she could even be born. We need to start with what Angela knows about the day Lisa was killed. At first, she says, she got all those details from her Aunt B. She didn't want to press the older woman. She just listened when her aunt wanted to talk. Most of that information came soon after Lisa's death in January of 1999. But B would occasionally bring up the day Lisa died at other times too, and Angela just tried to be there for her. Lisa was killed on Wednesday, January 6th, and based on the police file, we know that B left for work at around 6:30 a.m. that day, and she arrived home at 4:45. Lisa was at home for at least part of the day. We know that because a neighbor saw her and greeted her. The apartment complex was breezeway style and not an enclosed building with halls, so her front door was directly exposed to the outside. B and Lisa, they lived on the ground floor, so they had a back door that opened to the outside too. Here's what B told Angela.
B would talk to me from time to time, and I said, when I felt that maybe she could talk about what happened, I said, I'm so sorry you had to find Lisa like that. And she said, yeah, it was awful. So she goes into what she saw. And, she says, I had called her that day. I was on my way home and I was going to stop by the store. And she said, she was pregnant. I said, yeah, I know. She said, I called and asked to see if she wanted me to bring her anything, but she didn't answer the phone. And I said, so around what time did you call her? She said, it had to be about 4. She said, she didn't answer the phone. She said, I didn't think anything of it. I went home. She said, I thought she was sleeping. You 8 months pregnant. She said, so I didn't think anything of it.
According to B's police interview, she told the detective a few important things about the moments after she entered the apartment. Here's what she said. Quote, when I walked into the house, I saw the VCR and the TV on the floor in the kitchen, and the back door open about an inch or two. I called for Lisa, and I called for her, but I didn't get an answer. I saw her keys on the living room table. I thought she was gone outdoors looking around, and then I went from room to room looking for her, and then I went to her door, and I noticed that her door was locked, and I was calling her name, and then I tried to open the door with a butcher knife, and could not. And that is when I called the police, and I told them that something was wrong with my baby. Then I kicked the door, and I broke it in.
She said, I go and I try to break into the door, and she said, and I did actually get in, and she said, and that's when I saw the most heartbreaking thing you could ever see. And I said, I'm so sorry you had to see that. She said, baby, it was so bad. Blood was everywhere. And she said, I'll never forget what I saw.
Lisa had spent months gathering items for her baby, Velvet. A baby chair, children's books, clothes. She'd lovingly stored each item in her bedroom to await her daughter's birth. When B finally broke the door down, everything was bloody. The bed, the floor, each item Lisa had collected for her baby. Lisa had been attacked, suffocated, stabbed, and a plastic bag, or plastic wrap, was over her face. According to the police file, B tried to give Lisa CPR, but it was too late. Emergency services arrived, and Lisa was pronounced dead at 5:25 p.m. Lisa's death showed serious signs of what experts often call overkill. She'd been attacked in multiple ways, and it was incredibly violent. But the scene itself was also unusual. As we said before, we're withholding many of the details in the event that law enforcement can use them to identify a suspect. But based on what Angela was told and the details from the reports, it's apparent that Lisa's killer remained in her room for an extended period of time. There were a few important pieces of evidence recovered that we can mention. 2 fingerprints were discovered, one on a switch plate and one on the bathroom door. The detectives asked Bee if she turned on the bedroom light, but she couldn't recall. Law enforcement lifted prints from items that had obviously been disturbed, like the TV and the VCR, and they also printed the back door. There is also mention of a number of shoe prints in Lisa's bedroom. They all matched, indicating that they came from the same pair of shoes. Police took a number of items into evidence, including Lisa's sheets, cut carpet that preserved a shoe print, and the like. But the file does not contain information on what was ultimately done with every item. Regarding fingerprints, Angela says that some years back, she was told that an unidentified print was not high enough quality to submit to APHIS. Again, that's something that we would have loved to speak to Memphis police about, to make sure that Angela was given accurate information. We actually saw that there are a few latent print comparisons mentioned in the file, with results listed, so perhaps more was done. Either way, Angela hopes that any retained prints could be submitted now, if they haven't been in intervening years. According to the Commercial Appeal newspaper, police seemed to suspect that there'd been a break-in. The paper reported that, quote, Velecia Ann Lewis may have been killed during a burglary at her apartment. Someone entered the apartment by breaking in a door. On the surface, this makes sense. Bee did see the TV and the VCR on the floor of their home, and it seemed like their things were in disarray. There aren't any notations in the police file about specific items that were missing, though. Angela wonders if a burglar, surprised to find someone at home in the apartment, would have remained for the length of time that the crime scene indicated. The overkill, to Angela, it doesn't seem indicative of a normal robbery. Now, she doesn't rule anything out. Her time working in law enforcement administration has taught her that, but she can't help but note that it all feels so personal. Another thing about the Commercial Appeal article seems off to Angela. Not the reporting, but a detail that's contained within it. The report says that police noted the killer entered via breaking the back door. But Angela says that another cousin, who was often at the home, said that the back door of the apartment was actually already broken.
She said the back door was always broken. So unless the door was off its hinges, she don't believe anybody came in that way. And she said, because it was always broken. She said it was never fixed. You couldn't lock it properly. So I'm assuming when they did close the door, they had to put something behind it to keep it from being open. She said that the door never worked, so it was broken, even though maybe it was in the lock position.
This wouldn't have prevented someone from breaking through the back door, of course, but there is another issue that Angela's cousin raised that has complicated the situation for her. Lisa's keys. If you'll recall, Bee told police that they were sitting out on the table, and that was unusual. Lisa kept her keys in her purse. It was not just about her being neat, which she was. It was about security.
She said, so I'm really concerned with them saying that they came in through the back door. And I asked, why is that? She said, because in the report, it mentions that they left keys on the table. She said, and the only way Lisa would have had ever brought the keys out and put them on the table is because she opened the front storm door because she was letting somebody in that she knew. She said, so I know for a fact that this person would have came through the front door because the keys were left on the table.
So Angela's cousin, who was very familiar with Lisa's security habits, was convinced that Lisa would have had both front doors locked and that she had to use a key to open or close the storm door. Could she have decided to leave her keys out one day? Of course, but it was out of character. And your cousin was also bothered by the idea that Lisa would have let someone in at all. Who would it be? None of the family spoke up and said they'd been to see Lisa. So who would she know well enough to let in?
My family, especially living where they lived, they didn't just have people running in and out of their homes. So if you wasn't a close family member or friend, someone that they trusted, there was no way you were going to ever be sitting in their home.
The idea that Lisa may have known or trusted her attacker is something that Angela has considered for a few reasons. One aspect is the layout of the apartment. As we mentioned last episode, Lisa did have a firearm. She apparently kept it in her bedroom, which is farther from the back door, the point of entry that police considered the most likely.
Because her bedroom is maybe 5 to 10 feet away from the front door, but from the back door, it's probably a good 15 feet. I've been in the house, so I know what it looked like at that time. So she would at least had time if she heard somebody kicking in the door to be prepared with the gun, whether she went out or just sitting in her room holding the gun.
Again, that's supposition. But if Lisa had let her attacker in, then she would not have been prepared. Someone familiar with her surroundings might have also known that the back door was broken, if her cousin was correct about that detail, and they could have left through that exit. To our knowledge, the extended family was not interviewed, so we don't know that police had this information at the time of Lisa's murder. We know that they spoke to both men she dated in the last year, and that they had alibis that the police checked. One was at court and the other at work. The one who'd been at work had recently had back surgery too. The file does mention that they requested fingerprints from at least one of these men for rule-out purposes. Though burglary was discussed, the idea of conflict remained a topic in family interviews. Law enforcement asked about the people in the apartments that Lisa had conflicts with. B told police one of them lived next door and another upstairs. According to B, Lisa had mostly argued about loud music. Someone would play it and then Lisa would turn hers up too. She said that one woman had called the police on Lisa about it and that, quote, the same thing occurred upstairs, but my baby called the police on them. B said that the music arguments had been going on for about a month. When Memphis PD asked B if she could think of any recent conflicts that indicated a dangerous situation, B had one specific incident in mind. She said that when Lisa had dropped the rent off, quote, some of the dope dealers were there. She was concerned that these individuals knew Lisa was the one who'd been involved with calling the police. She said that Lisa had been pointed out to them by another neighbor. We don't know how she knew this, but that is what she told police. Obviously, this isn't something that can be verified now, but it was a possible motive that B was worried about. She said that some of the people who'd been there when Lisa dropped off the rent were involved in the arguments with her daughter. And there was another incident too. According to the police file, when officers were canvassing the area, one neighbor advised an officer that there had been a physical attack before Lisa died. The neighbor said that, quote, a black male with red freckles had an altercation with the victim on Saturday, 1299, and hit the victim in the head with a stick. We don't know if this was someone who lived in the apartment complex or was visiting, but that's obviously concerning. So Lisa had those conflicts with her neighbors, the turning up of the music, the calling of the police on each other, and the apparent incident with the stick. The primary neighbor she was having the music issue with lived next door and said that she did not hear anything on the day of the attack, although another neighbor, farther away, said that they did hear thumping noises, but they'd dismissed it at the time as kids playing. So what does it all add up to? Angela has been trying to figure that out for years. She wonders if more neighborhood interviews could have shed light on how serious and widespread the conflicts were. How angry were the various people that Lisa had reported problems with? What had actually been said about Lisa?
So it is true that Lisa and the landlord had a beef between them playing music and Lisa playing her music. So it was like, well, if you turning it up loud, today I'm going to do it. And if you read in the report, it states the
my Aunt B mentioned that Lisa and the neighbor had a problem, and they asked, how long had this been going on? She said about a month. So I thought no one would be that angry to hurt someone that bad if they've only been arguing for a month. Now, I could see if they shot her on the spot, if they were in a physical fight, but to spend time in the apartment to beat and mutilate her body after an argument, that didn't make sense. You understand what I'm saying? That made no sense to me. At one point in the report, it says that I think it was on a Saturday, so this would have been the weekend before the incident, that some guy showed up to the apartment and she was outside talking to this guy. This is a whole different person other than the two boyfriends. And he hit her upside the head. People were standing around and watching. And I thought that was odd. She's pregnant at 8 months. She's standing on the porch. Most people, everybody in the neighborhood didn't hate Lisa as they try to make it seem, because on the day of the murder, somebody who was going to school spoke to Lisa, waved at her.
Angela wonders why someone didn't step in. Or maybe they did, and she just doesn't know. That's what she's worried about.
I felt that certain things, I don't know, just wasn't looked into. So if you know that the neighbors have people coming in and out of their home, you at least want to know who was there on this day, and who was there on the weekend of. So talk to those people. They didn't talk to anybody, but I don't feel that they went out and canvassed to ask those questions, because it was pointed out they was hanging out the day before when she paid the rent, and they knew where she lived.
Based on the police file, we know that some neighbors were spoken to, but not all. There was a report of another recent break-in at the complex, too, and a police informant passed along information that a man was seen leaving the complex just about 15 minutes before law enforcement arrived on the scene the day of Lisa's murder. Though the informant gave a description, it's unclear whether they knew the man or not, and some children may have seen something happening at Lisa's place, too, but they were so young, just 2 and 4, that it's all very unclear. All told, there's not a lot to go on. One thing, though, that might be important is that Lisa kept journals, detailed ones. According to Angela, the police had these diaries at some point, but they were returned to the family. That's what she was told by her relatives. All except for one, which to her understanding was missing by the time that law enforcement collected them. Again, we don't have any notations on this in the official record, so Angela's going on what she heard. But if it is the one that she thinks it is, it feels like a significant detail. Maybe the journal was simply lost, but could it have been removed?
They didn't say what time period, but the way they knew that one was missing is because Lisa's nieces said that she was writing in a flower journal. So there's one whole journal that's missing, and I don't know if that's the one that's missing from December to the 1st of January or all of December and November. And that was a big thing in the family, that one of her journals was missing.
We told you last episode that Angela became focused on investigating Lisa's case after B's death, but her most intensive work started in 2022 after she got that file. Even before that, though, she searched the internet for reporting on Lisa, hoping that she might find new information or possible clues. When she did that, she was struck by how little media attention Lisa had received.
I think it was on the news the night that it happened. I've been searching to see if I could get news articles. Before I really got vested in doing this, it was just gnawing at me that you have a cold case in your family and you should do something. So before I started, I would just look to see if I could find stuff on the internet, type in her name. There was nothing to be found. I tried to do it through the archives of commercial appeals, and you have to have certain information, and I couldn't get through, but I was able to backdoor my way in and get 2 articles. And I was surprised how I went back to see, is this just normal? So I started typing in 1999 and crimes that, related to stabbing or shooting to see if I could get anything to come up on the internet in 1999 that occurred in Memphis. And I did. I found quite a few different cases. And I went all the way back and found cases that had been put on the internet from 1970s. It's strange and it's odd that she's hard to be located on the internet. So I went back. My goal was to make sure that people know about Lisa. So I started with memorializing her. That was the first step. I got information about her funeral plot. I called and I asked, if we could get this on one of the crime shows, America Most Wanted, Unsolved Mysteries. I'm throwing out names, right? And he said, well, we don't work with them when the case is still active. I would call and, I think I may have a little more help because the sergeants that I'm working with now seem to be a little more caring. But back then, they just stopped answering and wouldn't return any of my calls.
Angela got the file in 2022. In some ways, it felt like she'd been preparing for years. She'd done so much background work for Lisa's case, made so many calls, and worked to increase Lisa's online presence. They'd even found Lisa's class schedule so they could compile a list of her professors in the biology department. But actually sitting down with the paperwork, the autopsy, the description of the crime scene, she knew it would be hard, especially because she wanted to examine every angle. Angela's adult son offered to help. He still remembered when that call had come back in 1999 to give them all the awful news.
My son, we both got the report and I printed a copy. And before I read it, I said, it's going to be gruesome. I said, are you up to reading this? And he said, yeah, I am. I can read it. And he said, well, what about you? I said, well, I'm going to look at it like I'm looking at a case. I said, that's the only way I'll be able to get through it. But when I started reading it and seeing, I could pretty much place myself there because I was in the apartment and just hearing what my aunt had to see. It became not just a case to me. It's always been personal, but one day I never forget, we spent 2.5 hours going over the case. He had read it and I had read it. And so we're going back and forth. So he's been paramount into making sure that I stay focused. He pointed out things that maybe I missed the first time around reading the report. When he did his research by reaching out to the pastor, that the church that's in the neighborhood, he also was able to find out how many times the property had been turned over. He got pictures. The last thing that he brought to my attention, maybe it was about 2 months ago or a month or so, was they now had pictures of the inside property. He's given me names that I was able to research. So he's been, I would say, like a junior investigator on this. So he's really helped. And it did something to me. I guess you could say, a little obsessed with, I have to find out who did this to my cousin, and my kids had to tell me, Mom, you have to calm down. You can't get so engulfed in this, because after work, when I got off from 5, when I got this case and the report and I started reading, I spent from 5 to 2 a.m. looking and researching stuff, at least 5 to 6 days a week. And my kids you could see the concern and the worry in their faces. And they just say, you can't do this. This is not going to end well for you. And you need to take some time off. You need to take a break. I was under the impression that if I took a break, things are just going to get pushed to the side. So it was hard for me to just back away from it. I did recognize that I was becoming the case. I was too engulfed in the case, and I didn't want to get too personally in it to where I lose sight of what's right in front of me, some of the facts and some of the things that's missing. So like my family, my kids just said to me, I needed to take some time off. I took about maybe 3 weeks off. And then right during that time, I found out that my sister had passed. So I ended up taking another 2 months off. So a total of 3 months altogether. And that was the beginning of 23. So I took that time off. And when I did get back into it, my kids were telling me, you just can't put your whole free time in this. You will work some of it today, then we'll take some time off. So I started doing that, and I kind of got away from looking at the case report, and I started looking at maybe people who could actually help look at this with me, because it was becoming to where I was taking on more of it than anybody. So I found this place called Parents of Murdered Children. I actually joined the group and I went to one meeting. I can't go sit there and listen to this because it was too much for me.
Angela felt like she needed to do something more active, something that felt like it was furthering her investigation. Through research, she found out about second look training and forensic counseling. They offer a second opinion service, basically a case review, and Angela decided that she wanted to pursue that for Lisa's case.
I was telling my son, I said, well, this guy said that he'll look at the case that you have and he'll let you know whether or not you can use anything to tell the police department. My son said, I'll pay for it. I sent him what I had. He was very detailed. He's the one that told me when I go back to talk to the police department, don't start pointing fingers, don't name anyone, just go with what you have in front of you. He said, and you don't have much. He said, but there's so many items that they can do DNA and they don't mention whether they did this. He said, and I know back in 99, certain DNA they didn't have access to. And he said, it's called touch DNA. And when he said that, it just felt like a weight was lifted. But I started calling numbers that day. I was determined to find somebody. And I called the number and I got Sergeant Freeman. And he was so kind to me over the phone. He said, this is an old case, but I'll help you as much as I can. And he said, just give me the information that you have. So I mentioned to him about touch DNA. And he said, well, Miss Lewis, it's going to take us a while to get the information. So I'll be back in touch with you.
According to Angela's most recent conversations, she says Memphis PD confirmed that they've located stored evidence in the case that can potentially be tested, which is the news that she has been hoping for. Now she's waiting to hear that evidence has been selected and sent for testing. Because the evidence is old, it's not a sure thing that there will be results. But, she says, it's a start. She'd also like to see people who lived in the apartment complex tracked down and interviewed again. Some of her relatives were never interviewed, and other interviews were brief. She'd also love to see more family members' knowledge shared. Maybe it will line up with the information that law enforcement already has. We reached out to every professor Angela found in Lisa's major, but only one wrote back, and he unfortunately did not recall her after so many years. Lisa's family was never able to track down her friends from school. But what about a feature in the University of Memphis magazine, which alumni receive? What about a feature in the school newspaper? What about local news coverage or billboards placed near where she lived? There are so many options to attract the attention of people who knew her, who might know something. Right now, Angela wants one thing from our audience, besides sharing this episode and the flyer that we've made for Lisa. She would love for you to follow the Facebook page that she has established for Lisa in Velvet, where you can keep up with the developments and follow her efforts. There is a link in the show notes. It will just take a moment to do so. Angela has done an amazing job of tracking down every piece of information that she can. She began this year hoping to reach others who will support her. This podcast, it is just the first step. Angela now needs community to build momentum, and you can do that easily just by showing that support.
I feel like I've been sitting on an island, but now I feel like I have a team of people. It's a small team, but it's taking off some of the stress. I can go to sleep and not lay in bed. Even if I'm not working, I would lay in the bed from 10 to 3, couldn't sleep, and then have to get up in the morning to go to work. And thank God I work at home, but still have to be up and present to work. So to say that it's been stressful, it feels like a second job to me. I'm confident enough to say that I think this case is going to be solved, because I think God wouldn't have put me in this situation if I wasn't supposed to help out with solving this case.
If you have any information regarding the cold case homicide of Velecia Lisa Lewis, please call Memphis Crime Stoppers at 901-528-2274. Tips may result in a cash reward. Next time on The Fall Line, we're covering the case of Susan Menard Lund, formerly known as Ina Jane Doe. She was identified in 2022, but her murder remains unsolved. If you know of a case that should be covered on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please take a moment to rate and review our show in your podcast app of choice. My book, Lay Them to Rest, which covers years of my life working on a Jane Doe case and the world of forensic scientists who resolve unidentified persons cases, is out everywhere now as hardcover, ebook, and audiobook, read by me. You can order it anywhere you get books and through your local library. Find out more through the link in our show notes. If you'd like to support the show and the stories we cover, join us on Patreon or Apple Premium. 100% of our Patreon and Apple Premium earnings are supporting our Family Therapy Fund and actively paying for therapy for families who've appeared on our show. On Patreon, you can get early release, ad-free versions of our regular episodes for $5 a month. If you prefer Apple Premium, you can subscribe there as well. On Patreon, we also post occasional giveaways, updates, and blogs, which all patrons can enjoy starting at just $1. The Fall Line is written, hosted, and researched by Laurah Norton, with additional research assistance by Brian Warders. Interviews by Brooke Hargrove. Produced, engineered, and scored by Maura Curry. Content advisement by Brandy C. Williams and Vic Kennedy. As always, our most special thanks to Liz Lipka.